Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser, and for today's episode, I have on with me a very special guest. I'm pleased to welcome in Edwin Velez. You may know Edwin because he has a huge part in the Tampa scene back in the late 80s and 90s. You might recognize the name of the record shop, the venue, the blue chair. He's also in a host of bands, Awake, End of the Century Party, and so many others. But he's here to tell a story. Edwin, welcome into the podcast. It's great to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks, Jeff. I've enjoyed your interviews over the last year or so.
Well, I'm glad that you've been checking some of them out. I know that you definitely know quite a few people that have been on the podcast, and your history dates back quite a while. So we're going to get into all kinds of fun things today. So just before we get into all that, what exactly are you up to these days?
These days, I'm a grown man raising children, and that's a 25-hour a day job. Entertaining my kids is kind of my job right now. So that's really where I'm at. I'm a father, a husband. It's a big gig.
It is full time.
Yeah.
Well, before you got into all of the family life and moving on into later part of the years, we're going to time travel
Okay.
and go back to some of your earliest beginnings, thinking about where you grew up, some of your earliest musical influences, some of your first concerts, all these things that you were taking in at that age. So let's go back to where you grew up, Edwin. So where was that?
So I was born in California, and my mother was a college professor, single parent, out there, and she was pretty hip musically. When I was a little kid, I was really into music, like little kid. There was a point when I was about, I think, 8 years old. I locked myself in a room and listened to Stevie Wonder songs from the Key of Life. And then I was really a musical person when I was young. And then we moved to Florida. And I grew up in a place called Brandon, Florida, B-Town. It's on the east side of Tampa, the suburb. And that's really where it was a surprisingly musical area, as I'll get into, with some stories and such. But born in California, moved to Florida when I was a kid, to Brandon, and that's really where I grew up at. Went to high school and everything.
What was Brandon like at the time that you moved there, and what year about is this?
We're talking probably like 1981. The 80s. I was, a middle schooler, and Brandon was a, sort of country area outside of Tampa that surprisingly had a music scene building, a metal scene that is world renowned today. But me as a little kid, I was, inspired I'm talking like 12 years old, 13 years old, inspired by, bands from my neighborhood who were going around the world, performing. So I guess it was, it's a unique place, Brandon. And in musical history, it became, sort of the source, probably surprising to a lot of people, if they knew the bands and such, that of early, particularly metal music. But I was into it 100%. That's sort of the Brandon vibe back then.
Yeah. So thinking about some of those earliest memories of what you were listening to, and also as you were getting a little bit older, some of your first concerts, what comes to mind?
Well, so I'm from South Brandon. In my neighborhood, there was a metal band called Nasty Savage, who went on to be on the Metal Massacre comps, signed to Metal Blade. The singer was from my neighborhood, like 2 blocks away from my house. And other bands were early death metal bands like Massacre, Mantis, which became Massacre, Executioner, which became Obituary. So I was swimming around in all that, playing my 12-year-old music at the same time. So the first concert that I went to, the first real concert was Nasty Savage and a Tampa band called Sabotage at the Florida State Fairgrounds. And I was probably 13. And that was epic. And that, a lot of people will say my first concert was Huey Lewis and the News or something like that. And my, coming from my culture and from my neighborhood and from my area, it was a unique first concert experience for me. And not many people can relate to it, honestly. Um,
I would say that's definitely an anomaly, Edwin.
yeah. And then, I got older, a little bit older, and this is similar, maybe a year later, I went to a giant in Central Florida. There's a place called the Lakeland Civic Center, which had like all the big metal shows. So I went to Judas Priest, the Defenders of the Faith tour when I was a kid. I was probably about 13, 14. At Lakeland Civic Center, they had all these epic shows. They had Ozzy and Motley Crue, Quiet Riot, Iron Maiden, all these like tours would come through and play at Lakeland Civic Center. So I got a little piece of that by going to Judas Priest. I was really young, you know what I mean? I was like a little kid. But that was sort of the first concerts. At the same time, my family's pretty multicultural. I was at that time I was really into guitar playing, like way into it, like studied it, thought about it, practiced it. So beyond metal, I was into like jazz fusion and all these like guitar heroes, like directions that guitar playing took me. So as a kid, there was a metal scene in my backyard, but there was also, from through getting really technical about guitar, a broad horizon. I would go to concerts, jazz shows, reggae shows, world music shows as well. Mostly, I'd go with my mom, as a kid. But so, really sort of an eclectic background, but heavy on the metal, no pun intended. And the metal and the rock music was a big deal.
At what point did punk rock get in there with you?
So we were my I speak for myself and my gang, my culture, my friends at the time, my community, if you will. We were really into record collecting. So it was almost a sport. Like we were collecting metal records, you know, that were who could get the most obscure, European pressing of something that you never, no, we would like battle. It was like a battle, and it was a local record store in Brandon called Melody Records, which was a pretty important point in time at that point in time in the mid to early '80s. So through record collecting and just this expansion of knowledge and inspiration, honestly, it began to get into punk records, um, you know, simultaneously, so you're collecting, every imported British, Norwegian metal and, so many things. I mean, early, we were trading tapes as well. So in metal days, we were trading like rehearsal tapes, Sodom rehearsal tapes. And I was like, I'm like in seventh grade. We're heavy into that. And so I think, the times changed a bit, and the record collecting, I think, took me into punk, I think, a little more than necessarily some cultural exposure. So we were just nerds, record nerds, still are. And, we got into the punk stuff. First, it was sort of the punk stuff, like, you know, in the early, mid, I'd say like 85. The thing was like Suicidal Tendencies' first record, MDC's first record, Minor Threat. And then at that point in time, that kind of stimulated a lot of the punk hardcore exploration, if you will, at that point in time. And then, we were metalheads. Musically, I was a musician. So we had bands going, metal bands, and we played like when I was we play little shows. We do shows. I'm talking about like eighth grade. When I was in eighth grade, we played a show. We opened for what was called Executioner at the time, which became Obituary, and we played little shows and stuff. And my friends at the time, so it was DIY metal before it was DIY punk. So I remember in the early '80s, my friend Trevor, I think he like helped promote or book, and we're like 14, 15, 16 years old. Like a metal show was like Massacre, Morbid Angel, or it was all these big metal bands. Like today, you'd be like, holy smokes! Like if some guy in Norway is going, oh my God, that's the greatest show I've ever heard of. But it was like at a sandwich shop in our neighborhood. So we were DIY then, and that really translated when we started getting more into the punk and hardcore music. It was like it was the same thing. It was really a similarity in terms of style and aesthetic, I guess.
You mentioned the sandwich shop, so I imagine there were these places that may not have been your typical venue where some of these bands would be playing. Take us through that. Where were some of those different locations where you and your friends or these bands would be setting up to play shows at that time?
Sure. So I'll touch on the metal years. So in the metal years, it was always a DIY venue. There was a place called I mentioned Side Streets, which had a lot of like. There's a clip on YouTube right now of Massacre playing Side Streets, and it's awesome. It is. It's like 1985, and it's like the genesis of death metal. Like it's really from the heart. It's really like good music. So so we were too young to get into bars. Obviously, it being in middle school and such. So this place called Side Streets had all ages shows. Massacre played there. Nasty Savage probably played there. Executioner played there. All these metal bands. So there was this microcosm, this kind of ecosystem of all the kids in Brandon that had guitars and were starting little bands and stuff. And so there were Side Streets, and then that sandwich shop gig. I think that was a one-off, but that Trevor helped promote. There's a flyer online somewhere you could probably find it. Pretty cool. Um, Sandwich shops. Then there was bars that we couldn't get into. So Nasty Savage would play a place called Ruby's Pub on the north side of town, and some other places we couldn't really get into there unless we snuck in or something. But that was kind of the metal years. Then going into the hardcore years or the punk and hardcore years, we there were some house shows. Not much in Tampa. Tampa wasn't a big house show type of place like Gainesville is. So we would set up shows at houses, but there was a couple of clubs going into the punk years, which is high school for me. There's a place called the Sunset Club on the north side of town. I was, we started the band Awake. It was one of my earliest, being a promoter or like, helping producing shows. I think the woman's name was Sandy who ran that. We were in high school. They had touring bands coming through, and the woman was like, I don't know who's Dinosaur Jr. or she's like, and we were like, well, we'll help you. And so we started like, which is kind of a similar story, I'm sure, in Miami and South, in every area around the country, where the kids are like, we'll help you. We were into this. You don't have to pay us. We'll figure out. So the Sunset Club was a pivotal venue in my youth, and we played Awake. We played there so many times, and I remember it was the first time I did sound, and I didn't know what I was doing. I think there's a straight edge band called Instead that was playing, and the woman was like, Edwin, the sound man didn't show up, and I'm like, and I was like, oh, okay, and because I've been in garages, we've been playing music. I mean, I could figure it out. I remember I like duct tape a microphone to the snare drum and like moved some knobs and like kind of like figured it out, and it worked out. But that was like, I was like 16 years old. So the Sunset Club, big deal. Early death metal shows there, early national bands, came through. But it was in North Tampa, kind of the student area where I think like Morbid Angel and some of these metal bands that weren't from Brandon but were from Tampa, kind of where they lived or hung out. So there was a lot of significant metal shows there, and it was a crossover too. So we would play with we would open for Nasty Savage. We would play. There was a crossover kind of what do you call it when things cross pollination of metal and hardcore and indie, what we call indie rock. There were touring bands would come through. So the Sunset Club was a big deal. And then we're still on the topic of venues. There's a neighborhood called Ybor City. So Ybor City is a historic area here in Tampa that we all, as youth, myself and my friends, we would, skate. We were into skateboarding big time, by the way. And we would skate. We were too young to get in the clubs. We'd hang out outside of clubs and try to talk to girls. We would skate. There would be hardcore shows there. The first Awake show was at a guy's loft. I think his name was Herman's Loft. I think that was his name. And I was about 15 or 16. And we were like, we got a show. And it wasn't the Sunset, the Sunset Club was going. We didn't play there yet. So we're like, we all get in our van. We're all ready. We're so hyped. We're like little kids ready to play a show. And we get there and they're like, show's canceled. This was a time in Tampa where there was a lot of violence and a lot of racist skinhead violence. And that night there was a famous court. These guys got arrested. These guys from the scene got arrested for murdering somebody, and it was like a racist murder, framed that way. And so we're like kids, like coming from Brandon, like, yeah, listening to our music, ready to hyped up, and they're like, show's canceled. And it sort of, in a way, was a metaphor for change in a way at the time, in looking back. So the show got canceled, but but going back to venues, there was a place called the Star Club that also opened up. And again, this was a guy, I think his name was Steve Cable. This was a guy who was like, hey, you kids want to work for free and do this for me? We were like, look, man, we'll bring these bands, we'll come with our friends. And he was kind of exploitative more so than the Sunset Club lady. He was kind of like trying to, make money off. It was kind of like a vulture in a sense. But we did a lot of shows at the Star Club. So if you take all of what I just described, I was a connection for bands in the scene of Tampa, and there was a publication called Book Your Own Life, which came out from Maximum Rock and Roll. It had like, if you go to this town, here's the guy to call. And I was on that and I was living at my mom's house, and I was like 15, so I started getting all these calls. And I'm just like, okay, maybe we can put up a show, So it's all DIY metal to DIY punk. The venues, they always needed us. We were an asset. We made it happen for them, like even if we duct taped, the microphones to making flyers and promoting shows. And it went all the way to the Star Club in those early venues. Star Club, Green Day, before Star Club, there was the Paint Factory, which was called Skyliners. That was another small, random venue. Somebody we knew had owned it, and my friend Richie, brought Green Day, and it was like, I think it was 1990, and Awake played. We had Quicksand down there. But it kind of faded out. And then the Star Club was going at the same time, and for a couple more years. And there were some great hardcore shows, mostly hardcore and punk shows at the Star Club. Early bands like, I think Burn came down. I think Born Against, Judge played there twice. There was a Green Day. Whoever was on Instead played there, I think, too. Whoever was on tour in that late 80s, I think that might have been like 89, I think.
There was
So
also been, I guess, some debate as to what the name of that venue was, though, with
which
the
one?
Skyliners, the Paint Factory,
It
and
was the first here. I was there. So at first, the first show was Green Day, I believe, and Richie will correct me if I'm wrong. And it was called Skyliners because it's in downtown, and you can see like the downtown city a bit, which is really dumb. And it was owned by a woman who I still know. Her family like inherited it, and there was a gentleman that was like the boyfriend, and he was like, "Let's here's some space. What do you guys want to do?" And so I think he came up with that name. And then I think that historically it was some type of paint distributor or some type of industrial use paint related thing. So they changed the name to the Paint Factory after the first. It was like for like a week. It was called Skyliners, and they did the first Green Day show. But
and didn't Awake play that show as well?
we did. We played almost all the show. We played all the time. Look, we had we were great friends with everybody. We had a crew of people. We had a community of people that everyone, everybody wanted to be at their concert, at their shows. And so we played a lot of shows. We were on a lot of gigs, and we were like active, like helping produce the shows too. So we were on the bill a lot. So
Talk about the Beliefs EP. That's one of my personal favorite Florida
yeah.
releases. Came out at the tail end of the 1980s. So, what's the backstory on that EP?
So we started Awake. I think I was like 15 in Brandon. We're coming out of that metal area, kind of coming into the hardcore scene. We were inspired by everything, inspired by, a lot of the positive hardcore music, 7 Seconds, Uniform Choice, stuff like that. And also all the, reggae and hip hop music as well that we were part of as well. So 15 years old, started Awake, played shows, DIY, like I just described. In we had connections to the metal scene, through Nasty Savage, through you know other metal bands, and we put up some songs together, and we went and asked, can we record? It's Scott Burns, famous Scott Burns, was like, come on in. He became our homie, and he was like, come on in. Um, and the when I listen back, it's interesting when I listen back to it, and I also see old videos. We were just hyped up. We were like everything. Like if you listen to the record, there's a rap on there. There's like kind of a metal sound on there. There's like some reggae kind of sound and stuff. It's kind of all over the place, for better, for worse. And when I look back on that era of time, we were just inspired, excited, young people who were really super into music, and really, even Dave from Nasty Savage does the intro on one of the songs. So if you were to describe Beliefs, you wouldn't say like this is a hardcore album, like some kind of straightforward hardcore. You wouldn't say it's like a rock album. It was kind of all over the place, and I appreciate that. And so it kind of came about. So those days, you write letters. We write letters. You're like, hey, I love your band. Got any stickers? Here's $3 for a record and stuff. And Trevor, who played bass in Awake, my good friend, he was pretty heavy on the networking through letters, I think. And there was a gentleman in Minneapolis area, Skeen Records, and he was like, "Hey, let's try to put it together. Let's make a 7-inch." And we were like, "No problem. Say less." And we hustled and went into the studio, and he hustled up there in Minneapolis. I think his name was Jeff, and he hustled up there. He actually borrowed money from other, like Victory Records, put some money in, and this other guy in New Jersey, like he put it together too. So we were all hustling, and and we put together the Trevor's dad printed this epic fold out, which is a little over the top. But like I said, we were kids, we were so excited. Um, and Trevor's dad printed it, and then we sold several thousand of them, and it was a great experience. It was cool, man. I'm proud. I mean, I was in high school, and it was Scott Burns. The recording was great. I mean, Scott Burns did it, and he's a G. So
I think
that's
he
kind of
also
the
I think he
voice.
also mentioned you guys in his book too
I hope so.
that he put
I,
out.
I I heard. I don't know if that's an autobiography. I think somebody else may have mentioned it. It's not a hit, but Scott. Look, Scott. We even recorded after that a bit with him. Like he's a great person. Like he was just a cool guy. He was our friend, and we were just kids, and he'd give us a break on the price, and it still stands up. The recording, like it's Scott Burns who did, the legend.
Right.
It's interesting. So Morrisound is a legendary place, and being there. We recorded our record, our 7-inch there when I was a teenager, and then we went on to record a couple more times there. And I visited there many times. One of my personal claim to fame is for some reason the band Death was recording a seminal album called Leprosy. It's considered possibly the greatest death metal record of all time. I happened to, through some friends, the Odachuk brothers, somehow they were friends from the old Brandon Metal days. Somehow they're like, we're going to go by the studio. So I happened to be a fly on the wall, with a couple of, just like not saying anything when Death was recording Leprosy at Morrisound. So personally, for music nerds like myself, I say, hey, Death, I was there, man. They were recording Leprosy. Like some people get it, but that was epic. But Morrisound, big deal, Morrisound. Um, I was also, I think when we were doing Beliefs, Terrorizer was recording a record there, which is considered one of the greatest like grindcore metal crossover records of all time to this day. So they were there, which was Morbid Angel guys with Brazilian guys, I think. Pete from Morbid Angel, Pete Defeat was on the drums there. So I think that was around the same period of time. So again, cross pollination in Tampa is my background. That's kind of the culture at that time.
What other towns and cities around Florida was Awake playing besides the Tampa Bay area?
Yeah, we played a lot in Tampa. We made connections in Miami and South Florida, and in particular, Lawrence and the guys from the Believers. So Lawrence, formerly known as Rabbi, we just clicked with these guys. I mean, they were, and we were, up in North, and in our part of the state, it was kind of country. It wasn't as multicultural, particularly where we were specifically from. So it was a breath of fresh air to go to the Cameo Theater, and a hardcore scene and be, high-fiving people we were homies with. And particularly Lawrence, they were just like us, man. They were like, they love all kinds of music, hardcore, punk, reggae, hip hop. They were just like us. And the same with the Believers. The Believers, they were kind of from a suburb, Palm Beach Gardens area or West Palm Beach, and they were just like us too. We were from Brandon, which is kind of a suburb, and so we were all into the same stuff. We were all super open-minded, like even like we just like to talk about. Did you know about this? Did you know about all kinds of musical stuff? So we were linked up big time in South Florida. Love those guys, and they booked us a lot. And one of the greatest shows that I ever played when we were in Awake was we got put on Youth of Today at the Cameo Theater, and I think it was '89, and I was in high school, and we brought like 8 carloads of teenagers down to Cameo Theater, and man, when I tell you Miami Beach in the late '80s hardcore scene. It was a beautiful thing, man. It was people were like graph writers. People were like graph writers, people were into hip hop, multicultural. Skinheads were of all races. There was Latino people. It was wonderful, and I really cherish that time, and it was a real inspiration. And we tried to go back there as much as we could. And thanks to Lawrence and everybody for booking us. We really enjoyed that era. We also, we played in some of the, like, I think Broward shows too over the years, which were cool. The Believers were the super cool guys too. And then, we would go to up north from there, Melbourne area. John White. I don't know if you've ever heard of John White. You should have him on the show.
I have.
We would play in that area too. And it was those were good times too. I'll have to say though, I have to tell you though, in the mid to late '80s, hardcore scene in Florida, you kind of had to know what you were doing. Like you couldn't, like there was a lot of violence, particularly in the Tampa, Pinellas area in Orlando, a lot of skinhead violence, and you kind of had to not be dumb. You kind of had to be careful, and we were. But I tell you, we were. We there was a lot of altercations that we weren't part of. To be honest with you, that some of my wildest playing in shows memories. I think it happened actually in Melbourne one time, where we would be playing. We would actually be on stage playing, and we would get into a fight with during the set with people in the audience, and it would be some kind of tussle. It happened a couple of times in the early days, and I think back on that, like, what kind of world we live? When I think about my kids, teenagers these days, I'm like, we were actually on stage, and then next thing you know, we're actually in a fight with people. The context I'm saying is, you're asking about the scene in the broader state. South Florida, Miami was a dream come true. To this day, I love it. The cameo's still there. I look at it fondly, and I think about the great times we had there. Big ups to Lawrence in particular. And it inspired, honestly, the cameo scene, the South Florida scene inspired me. Later on in Tampa, I remember this. Lawrence had back then had told me about that he booked a hip hop show, or he was involved in the production of a hip hop show. It was a band called Brand Nubian, which was, I was like, that's amazing, man. I love Brand Nubian. And there was some funny behind the scenes things that he told me about, but I just kept that with me in Tampa in the later years as the parallels between, and we can get into this in further in the conversation, the parallels between early hip hop and hardcore punk and even early DIY metal, as far as like production, venues, promoting, the perceptions, they're very similar. So South Florida, big deal. And that was kind of the scene from my perspective in Florida in the late '80s, mid to late '80s, hardcore punk scene.
Did you all ever get out to Jacksonville or the Panhandle, like Pensacola?
Not much. I don't think we played Gainesville. We didn't get there though.
Gainesville.
We'll go there in a second. Not much Jacksonville. I don't think we even played there. I don't recall that. Later in other bands, I'm talking. Well, I'm stuck in a period here. I'm not. There's another era, a couple of other eras actually going. Not much, but Gainesville, yes. Gainesville is like our sister town. I mean, we like everybody went to college. Like even the singer for Awake ended up going to college in Gainesville. Just like a lot of bands from South Florida, their singers or their guitarists all went to Gainesville, and so we played Gainesville a bunch of times. What a fun place! Gainesville was the type of place in the late '80s that there was house shows. Like it was like there's old houses and no one called the cops. Like you're in the backyard playing, and that was a really wonderful thing that we didn't have in Tampa, because the first note of the first song there would be a chopper and cops blowing you up. Like in Gainesville, it was just like, here's the keg, like let's go play the music. Like it was a good time up there.
You mentioned that you also got into hip hop. I think for a lot of people, myself included, when you think of hip hop, I don't think Florida comes to mind, maybe for bass music and that type thing. But when it comes to hip hop, talk about that. What was that like back in this time? Were there anyone of note that you were following or maybe even catching at a show?
Yeah, so Miami was like New York City to us. So there was there was a period of time, probably mid to early 80s, where the bass music from Miami and Tampa were very closely related. There's a portion of time where slowed down tapes. Do you know what slowed down tapes are? So I'll explain. In Texas, it got more popular in Texas, DJ Screw. You take a tape of like a hip hop song, but you slow down, like like it slows down, and the bass is like this rumbling slow bass. And there's a lot of stuff online about this. You all can look it up. In Tampa, there was a guy named Rocket Rod and a group called Jam Pony, and they were doing slow down tapes and bass music and such. And the Miami artists as well were kind of they were all like knew each other. They were all like it was all like the same thing. So in the mid to late 80s, it was mostly bass music, slow down tapes, car music. You know, you're driving a car and you have these, this sound. It's a physical sound, and that's rad. That was super cool. And it's a historical moment in musical history. So there was that. And then in Tampa, there's this community radio station. We're blessed. 88.5 WMNF community radio since I moved here when I was a kid. We're blessed. I mean, it's a miracle that this exists. And there was a guy there named Kenny K. And Kenny K was a champion of hip hop music from New York to West Coast, of playing hip hop music and supporting local artists. So uh, as 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 a Floridian, we began getting exposed to, and a lot of people will testify to this, locals, to a lot of broader hip hop music from this radio program from Kenny K. Kenny K was sort of a member of Digital Underground. Shock G, rest in peace, is from Tampa. He went to Chamberlain High School. So there was these early tentacles of national hip hop music coming to Tampa through Kenny K and the community radio program there. And so we were listening there. As far, in my opinion, as far as artists from the state, there wasn't a lot of significant at that point in time, and people can argue with me. There wasn't a significant amount of great artists, in my opinion, from the late '80s in time. It was sort of national acts, and we were, and so then we haven't gotten into the '90s yet, but that was sort of the vibe there on hip hop. And I just want to say one thing for my generation, and I hope a lot of people can agree with this. One of the greatest musical phenomenon in all art happened in the '80s from Long Island, New York. It's a group called Public Enemy, and it was and their art changed everything and changed the world for a lot of the kids in the hardcore scene from all scenes of life. And I just want to say, as far as art, that changed the world. They weren't from Tampa, but they weren't from Florida, but that changed, like it just changed the world when their music came out. So that's how the hip hop scene, from my perspective, and that's just my perspective. Other people have their own. That was what it was like in the mid to late '80s in Florida.
And as we start to get into the 90s, how did things shift at that point? Were there some new venues popping up? Were there some new bands going on? Like, what was that all like as the decade shifted?
Yeah, I could say in from many genres of music, from hardcore music going into the 90s, things changed a bit. Like for me and my world in my community, the sort of traditional hardcore music, whatever that means, traditional, was kind of not that fresh anymore. Musically, we were so looking for the next thing all the time, like so always always looking for the next type of inspiration. That some of the traditional hardcore music was kind of lame. Like we were just weren't into it anymore, and there came this like sort of second wave of from South Florida. There was a lot of bands in Tampa, a lot of bands that were kind of like you know kind of boring hardcore bands. Not all of them, but in Tampa as well. And so we kind of like we're trying to find something new. In terms of hip hop, and from my perspective, a lot of the there's a lot of young people were starting to make some more creative. And I referenced Kenny K's bringing this culture on the radio to my city. There was a lot of younger people who were advancing their art and getting into creating good hip hop music that wasn't particularly bass music or that type of music. It was a little more maybe nationally influenced.
Wasn't also skating culture starting to even have a boom too in the early 90s? Did that have any
It was
role in what was going on too in the scene?
a huge role. So we were skaters. Most everybody I knew, and from I often say in my neighborhood when in the 80s or my community, you either had to play an instrument, skate, or fight. So that was kind of like your test, and that's not cool. That's a kind of a bad thing. But so skating was a part of life. It was a huge deal. As we went into the 90s, my best friend Brian Schaefer, he started the skate park in Tampa, which is still in business today, 32 years, most famous skate park in the world. He was my neighbor in Brandon. We were on parallel with skaters. There were so many parallels to being like a young musician. So a skater would get in a car, go to these areas of the country where there's ramps and try to get sponsored and just be out there traveling DIY with no money, skating. It was like an art. Musicians, we were doing the same. We would get in a van, go to try to play shows with no money, and try to get by and travel around to get sponsored. We weren't really trying to get a record deal or anything, but like just to play our music, to do our art, to do our skating. So there's a very parallel track in my world for those two things. As we got into the 90s, skating was kind of in a lull, and it kind of started getting a little more popular, maybe in the later 90s, but in the early 90s, it was still relatively obscure. But there's definitely a parallel there, and I've been a part of that since I was a kid. In Tampa, it's a heavy deal in Tampa, particularly.
I know that with Awake, there were no releases that came in the 90s for the band, but I'm sure for those that were fans of Awake, you kind of wanted something after that. So, was there ever anything in that got recorded that you all just never released, or was
There
it just the
was.
one and done?
We recorded with Scott Burns like two more times, um, uh, and we just weren't into it. Like it wasn't worth. I mean, it's good. It's there's all that I'm talking about, Jeff. I'm talking about this. Sometimes being into everything is unfocused. So we were into everything. So when we were making music, like there's like so many styles, so many changes, so many uh, things that it just didn't it wasn't cohesive. Like the art wasn't cohesive. And I would say, in my opinion, and it was a lot of it was my music. The recordings we made after that were good, but it just wasn't hitting. It was just we just weren't into it. Like and we were getting older, and as I mentioned, the styles changed. We were into different stuff. Um, so yes, there was two recordings done with Scott Burns. Um, I'll say one of them has a lot of double bass drums on it, which is cool. Like I enjoy, but I'm not sure everyone would enjoy. But that's just one little comment I'll let the people know.
Little teaser there, Edwin. No, that's great. I mean, you think about though one of the final Awake shows. Does anything come to mind that you can remember?
No, we went on to we like changed some members, and started and played some shows as a second band, and it was sparse, and we just it just we're a product of the environment. Like we just weren't that hyped on it. So the I guess the last show. So we would play. By the way, there's a production group out here called No Clubs. Tony from No Clubs. They used to put us on a lot of shows. Even through the end, like near the end, we would be like, "You're opening for Nazi Front." We're like, "Okay." And oh, here's the greatest story of one of our last shows. Okay, I'm working at this record store called Vinyl Fever in Tampa. I'm probably like 19 years old. This a gentleman calls me on the phone, and he goes, "Is Edwin work there?" And so I go, "Yeah, he's right here." I pick up the phone, and this guy, his name's Max, and he says, "Hey, you know that Iron Maiden Anthrax show that was supposed to be at the Sundome?" And I was like, "Yeah, I heard about that." He goes, "Hey, Iron Maiden pulled out, and now Anthrax is going to play. Can you guys open for Anthrax?" And I was like, "Who's this?" Uh, so the story is, they had some tour break apart. Anthrax were cool enough to be in, try to like put some local hardcore bands on, and they played like at a club date. So one of the awesome stories is, yeah, Iron Maiden pulled out. We replaced Iron Maiden to play with Anthrax at this club show one time. So that was kind of near the end.
It's funny you should bring up that story because when I recently had the band Ambugalard on from South Florida, they talked about a very
Down there.
similar story down south where they were opening for Maiden, Anthrax, and Maiden, and Anthrax decided to play a local club show, and Bougelard at the last minute got called by their manager
That's cool.
to play that show, and just how great of an experience this was because they were very influenced by
Yeah, it
Anthrax.
was cool. It was that's great.
It
And
is.
kudos to Anthrax for like trying to get local bands and keeping the show going. That's rad.
It is. It's really cool to hear those stories. So after Awake ended, what were you then doing musically?
So Awake ended, and me and Trevor were messing around with music. We were playing like jazz. We were trying to like do jazz music, and like just recording whatever we can and trying to just stimulate ideas. And that kind of faded out a bit. And then Blue Chair opened in '92. So we opened up this record store in '92, and that kind of took my direction away a little bit from jamming with those guys to being in Ybor City every day. So that was kind of the start of Blue Chair '92.
And this is a big deal because Blue Chair had so many iconic shows that came
Yeah.
through. So talk about the origins of the Blue Chair. How did it get its name? Who else was a part of it? And how did you all start to bring in some of these different bands from all over and also a lot of the local bands too?
Yeah. So I think it was '92. Two guys, a guy named Tom Rowe and Marty Clear, they had the idea and they found this space in Ybor City, to open a record store. and they started to do it, or they were preparing to do it. And I had worked at a record store at the time, right before that, at Vinyl Fever for a while. And through friends, they were like, "Who should we get to work here?" And we got, we hooked up, and I ended up working there and running it for from then on with them. And what was interesting is Ybor City, and one day we're going to make a movie about this, Jeff. If anyone out there has some skills in screenwriting, Ybor City, all this culture, everything I'm talking about, there's always this link to this part of town in the historic district. So Ybor City in '92 was sort of this dead zone for the popular general public, but for the artists and musicians and skaters and everybody, it was like we would go there all the time. We'd go there every night. So Ybor City, '92, record store. I came from a different world from these guys, generally speaking, but there are some parallels here. When we started doing like Ass Suck played, and they're like, "What is Ass Suck?" Oh, those are my homies from around the way, and we were doing like Ass Suck shows, but the same with like local indie bands. We kept this cross pollination going. Hip hop, we did some early hip hop shows. I know you had Funk Ghost on here. Funk Ghost was a part of a crew called Black Saturday, then became Tap Ghost and Phobia. We did some early local hip hop shows, which were amazing. We had the record store. We're doing shows. The the types of music ran the gamut. This is the early days, and we were selling records, selling music, and it just went on from there. Eventually, Tom moved to New York a few years later. Then it was just me, and we were doing. I mean, we did like 3 shows a week for like 5 years. So it was like, if you go to on Instagram, Handbills and Tickets, this guy's page, he has like hundreds of Blue Chair flyers. Like there are like hundreds of them, not like dozens of them. There's like hundreds of them. So we set up a system. We put the record shelves on wheels and move everything to the side, have a show, clean up, move everything back, and do this, all the time, like constantly. And at the time in Ybor City was a magic time where there wasn't a lot of cops, there wasn't a lot of commercial industry there. We had there's photos, in the museum recently, the Florida Photographic Museum has these pictures of Blue Chair. And there's like 100 kids in front of this, storefront several times a week. So it was a great time. I think it's the best thing about it, Jeff, is that to this day, a lot of local musicians and artists and such kind of got their start or had an opportunity, back then to do whatever they want to do. And I think it inspired people, and they tell me, they come up to me, tell me how much it inspired them. If they could, their band could play, even though they just figured it out, or the hip hop guys were like, the first time I ever walked on the stage was, at the Blue Chair, and and so it was a great time. It lasted till about '96, and it was a good run. We had a great time, a lot of memories, and hundreds and hundreds of shows. Mostly, so it started with like local and also at that time, I think '93, Tom released a CD called Tampa Sucks. So there's like Ass Sucks on it, and like there's like 15 bands, I think. So if you look that up, you can see like kind of this multi-style scene from that point in time, and it has pictures of the Blue Chair on it, from it's kind of like our CD. But it went from sort of a local, diverse, musically diverse thing to go more into a punk thing. Even like national bands coming through and calling me, and we would set up shows. And then I was in, then we started End of the Century Party in the mid 90s. And so we had a network around the country, around the world. So it kind of skewed a little more hardcore and hip hop over the later years, but that's sort of the story.
And because it is bringing in all these different types of bands and acts and performers and what have you, as far as the crowds, was there any experiences where things were over capacity, got a little crazy, or anything that may have transpired that just stands in your mind as some of the more wilder moments in the blues genre's
Yeah,
history?
there's there's a lot of that, and I think the statute of limitations is passed. So, um, look, I like I described in the 80s. I we came from a rough, relatively rough compared to other people's experiences. Kind of a rough, violent at times world. And so into the 90s, I'm kind of the older guy, and there's younger people coming in. We weren't shocked. We could we kind of handled our own thing. It was a There was a heavy community vibe. So if someone was acting really stupid, there's like 30 people would walk around and go, "Hey man, you're acting stupid. Can you get out of here?" Like I wouldn't even have to say anything. Like the community respect, the community control of themselves really helped things not go insane, there wasn't any. I didn't have to call the cops. I never called the cops in 5 or 6 years. Um, Somebody got thrown through the glass window one time. But you know what? Like the community thing, their friends called me and said, "We're going to put some money together and pay for your window." You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like no one was like stupid. Like there was they had a respect because they knew I'm an artist. Like they knew that I wasn't a culture vulture. So there was a lot of respect with the hip hop stuff in the early hip hop days. If you're doing if you're putting on a hip hop show, a local hip hop show, early days, early 90s, the only way you could get people to go is to say there's an open mic because, just like hardcore punk and metal, everyone wants a venue. Everyone is an artist. Everyone's crafting, wood shop, and everyone is an artist and they want a shot. So in order to get people to go, you'd have to put open mic on the flyer because then they'd have a little crowd of cool people, and that's a challenge sometimes. There's a little bit of there's a little bit of sometimes people will get their feelings hurt, or their egos. There's a little bit of ego work with the young people in the 90s in the hip hop open mics. A couple times that somebody got punched on stage one time. Maybe there was talk of a gun a couple times. Nothing really bad happened, but it was edgy music, edgy scene, young people. And if they knew, and they did, that we were one of them, like we weren't like a cop. That we could control, the community. We could sort of tamper it down, and things would, and it would happen, over and over that people chilled out. People were like, "Hey man, like don't do that here." Like, so nothing super crazy. Capacity was, we were always flexing the capacity. Some of the bigger shows, there was a band called 15, who were great. They played twice, and they have a song where they shout out the blue chair. I forgot the name of it. I think it's called 924 is the name of the song. And they're like, "At the blue chair," like another personal claim to fame. They packed it out. They were great. I really enjoy 15. I really like their music. That was probably one of the bigger shows as far as capacity. And then, there was a record label called Fat Records in the 90s who had a lot of these kind of California punk bands. And a lot of them came through, and those were pretty big shows. That was a pretty popular scene at the time.
Sure. I know I've seen flyers and even some things on YouTube from when Lagwagon came there and even Tilt.
Yep.
And
Lagwagon. I can tell you, Lagwagon, Tilt. There's a I can name there's if we want to go that direction, um, there was a bunch of bands. There was a band called Doctor Strange Records. They had a band called Mandingo. Those guys were cool. They came twice. Um, a lot of Doctor Strange Records and Fat Records. Those guys came through a lot. For there was a
Sure.
particular booking agent. I think his name was Mike Kelly, and he would call me and put those shows together. Other than that, though, there was a lot of hardcore bands like Unwound played, which was a pretty big deal. Ass Suck a bunch of times. My band would play a lot. Inhumanity was our brethren from South Carolina. And they played a lot of shows. We made so many friends. It was a great time, man. We were all broke, man. Everyone was broke, but we had the spot where we could all hang out and play music, and no one bothered us.
Right.
So
Were there any other venues that were like the Blue Chair that were also happening around the same time in the greater Tampa Bay area?
at that time, no. There was the Stone Lounge, which is a club. That's a bar. It's different. A bar is different than what we were doing. A DO, kind of not a bar. Stone Lounge was open. They had a lot of great shows. Um, there was just a regular bar venues, alcohol venues that had good shows. Janice Landing, other spots, just regular shows, but not like a record store at that time. I think there was after us, 403 was a record store doing concerts, and there was another one, I think Tarantula Records and the Kids. There was a couple ones after we kind of shut down that came up.
What were your relationships like with some of the other promoters for some of the other venues around that same time too?
Pretty good. A lot of them were like, here's this show that no one's going to drink a single ounce of alcohol. Can you do it at the Blue Chair? You're like, yeah, I love that band. Uh, so this goes in. That comment is an interesting thing I wanted to hit on, which is a parallel between. And so, after the Blue Chair, I was promoting concerts at clubs and stuff, and other venues. So that comment, like, they're not going to sell any alcohol, but will you take them? Like, so hip hop music and hardcore music or punk music, both, young kids, young people who don't necessarily want to drink, um, who have a perception of danger, or unknown, you know, some kind of perception by the mass world that there's gonna be some kind of problem. So those two lanes of music in the 90s, as far as producing shows, were very similar. And that's how I kind of got into uh, producing hip hop shows, because it was the same thing. It was like, yeah, we got to trick this venue into having a show because they don't know what we're doing, and they need us. They're dead. So we'll put 200 people in there. But yeah, they're young kids. But you're talking to me. I'm going to take responsibility. I'll tell you what's going on. So yeah, the relationships with other venues was reasonable. And sometimes they would send things our way that they didn't think would fit, or sell alcohol at their venue. So pretty good relationship.
And you mentioned, Edwin, while all this is going on, your next band, End of the Century Party, is also happening, which to my ears was a departure from Awake.
Yeah,
So talk about End of the Century Party, some of the earliest beginnings of that band, and kind of take us through some of the highlights if you could.
sure. So in the early 90s, like I said, music had changed a bit. Like, and some of the hardcore music that we were into in the late 80s were kind of like lame. We weren't that into it. We were, wasn't stimulating. There was kind of a new style, that a new, there was new music that was out that was a little more noisy, a little more aggressive, faster. And we were all into it. We changed, came from grindcore metal. Like, it wasn't like we 100, like a 180 degree. Like, it wasn't like unknown. So we started, in the Century Party, some folks that were friends, of mine from the Blue Chair scene, We just started, started playing music. I think we were practicing in the blue chair when we first started, and we just started developing music, developing songs, practicing. And then one guy from the scene said he'll put out our 7 inch. We're like, okay. We put out a 7 inch at first, which I think was 94, 95. I don't recall the exact year, the first 7 inch. But so look, we just started. We started. I was into it. We were all into it. We playing fast is something that I really enjoy doing and hearing, like as an audience member. And so we just started playing a faster style, and we had, we're blessed with the fast drummer B, our guy B, and we just took it from there, man. We just enjoyed ourselves and made records, made friends, toured, just tore it up. It was a great time. The music is esoteric. It's kind of abstract. It's kind of hard to follow for some people. Not for me and my unique friends, but okay. It's like, it's hard to explain like grindcore music or fast hardcore music to square people, and that's okay. But it's not. You have to be confident in order to play wild music, and not care if anybody can wrap their head around it.
Sure.
So it's the energy. It's the, playing shows. We had a great time. Went to Europe, went to around the country a couple of times, Canada. It's great. We had a great time. It was a great point in my life.
How
It
does
was
that opportunity come to you guys to do that type of tour?
the same as it always was. We just knew people, DIY, no cell phones, no computers really. You know, one band knows another band. We were, like I said before, we were tight with this band Inhumanity from South Carolina, and we would go out with them and go, hey man, let's go up to South Carolina and back. And people, we know people in Florida, people up there, and together we're one. And then we go, let's go to California and up to Canada, and you guys come with us too. And it was just like by the seat of your pants, like kids. Look, the thing about it is, before the internet, like there's kids just like you in Huntington Beach, California, or Oxnard, California, or Eureka, California. They're just like, or in Germany, they listen to the same music, they have the same lifestyle, they know the same things as you. So you just connect the dots, you hit the road. We were fortunate to get on a lot of comps, like some really cool ones that I'm still proud of. Like I think there's one called Speed Freaks. I was so stoked when we were on that. We put out records. Our friends, our other brothers, are a band called Palatka from Gainesville. That we're two peas in the pod with them too. Us, Palatka, and Inhumanity were the trio. We were just friends, homies, like good friends. We just traveled around, played shows. They put out a 7-inch up there, and then the bass player for Palatka, Jason, he put out our LP. Like, so it was just all friends and everything. And then, we eventually made it to Europe in the later years, and that was a wonderful time.
What were some of those craziest moments that you had when you
Oh, you want crazy moments?
when you were, because there had to have been things that this is your first time overseas, I imagine, at that
Sure.
age. So
Sure.
you're young. I mean,
So, I was kind of young. I was the older of the group, but so look, we went on look, the reason we were able, it's the same DIY network. The reason we were able, the main reason we were able to is that someone in Europe, Nick from England, put out our record in Europe. Like they're pressing them in England, they're selling them at shows or whatever. So we had this connection. Nick and others booked us a tour with the band Asshole Parade from Gainesville, another one of our friends, and we played. I think it was 45 cities. I think it was 12 countries, and and it was, man, I just remember getting there and going, we did it, man, we made it, man. I was like, this is it, man. I was so happy. I still am, still happy right now that I did. But it was 45 shows. That means that you have to load gear in and out. So that means 90 times you're loading gear. So after a while, you might get irritated with each other. You looking for crazy moments? I'll tell you a story. I think it was Dover, England, and this is kind of a cultural shock for me, or awakening for me. We were in England, and I think it was Dover, and we were with Asshole Parade guys, and we went to a bar, or like bar with music, and we were kind of dancing around, having fun. And in England, you get food at these like kebab shops, these little shops, and so we're like, let's go get some food. And we go in there, and I think it's me and someone else, and then a few of the Asshole Parade guys, maybe like three of them and like two of us. And we go in there and we start ordering food, and I'm like up there ordering food, and I turn around and there's like a fight going on, and I'm like, and then I realize it's us, and so we get into this brawl with these England guys, Brits, and we are in a fight for our lives. Like it's not a fake fight. Like we're connecting punches with each other, like a real fight. And I'm from Tampa, Florida. I think we're gonna die. Like like somebody's gonna shoot us, somebody's gonna stab us. We're about to die, and it was like a fair fight. So we're connecting blows, like they're kind of connecting blows, and we was going for a while. And I'm like, my heart is beating out of my chest. I'm like, I'm in Europe. We're gonna die. Like this is terrible. And then it kind of like the scuffle kind of dies down, kind of fades out, and we're kind of like on opposite sides of the chip shop. And the British guys, I'll never forget this. They come up and they go, "Hey, nice one," and they like shake our hands. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And they're like, "Hey, nice one," and I was like, "What?" Then they just told me like they kind of scrap out there, like the footballers that it's not like they don't take it all the way. So that was a funny story.
It's like in hockey where you could just have had a fight with somebody, and then when the game is over, you're shaking hands.
Yeah, I mean, that's different than America. I mean, my experiences in Florida, I should say. So that was a crazy scene. Other than that, in Europe, we really, it was just such a wonderful time. The squat culture, squats. So where it's like just like they take over a building. I don't even think they're doing it that much anymore, but it was just great, wonderful people, man. They cared about their community. They cared about their impact, that they weren't like, they were, the food was salvaged from garbage, and it was great. And the people were wonderful, and went to Spain. I went to Spain. It was a great time, man. It was a great experience. It was like 2.5 months, maybe 3 months, I think. So it was a big one. So that was end of the century party. We were on tour with Asshole Parade. Good friends of ours from Gainesville.
Very cool story. And I'm sure there's so many little sidebars we can go down depending on which country and town you were playing in at that point. When you were playing in the States and thinking about Florida with End of the Century Party, what other towns and cities were you all playing? Was it some of the same ones that you mentioned with the Wake? Were other places popping up? What are some of those memories you have from other towns and cities in Florida?
In Florida, we had friends. Gainesville was a big deal because Palatka was our friends, and we were tight. So we played Gainesville a lot. They had Matt Sweeting was talking about the Utility House. We played shows there a lot. We played with Los Crudos. There's a memorable show. We played, that was a big connection. The Gainesville Tampa connection during those days was huge. St. Augustine, there were some friends there. I think the singer for Asshole Parade I believe is from St. Augustine, so we played there a bit. We played in the Miami area, but not so much. I think we played in Orlando, so it was light. It kind of changed changed directions. It kind of went to Gainesville, and then into the southeast South Carolina where Inhumanity was from and such. And then we left. We went to the big thing then was I think it was 96 or 97 when we went to California with the end of the century party and Inhumanity and we got to see, there's this scene of music out there that we were fans of. There's a band called Swing Kids. There's this record label called Gravity Records. They released a lot of cool music. So we got to go out there and kind of hitch on with them and stay with that kind of scene and travel, around the country a bit. And that was really a cool thing for me. I really, we played a place called Che Cafe in San Diego, which is a famous place. And, all the way. We played at Epicenter, which is in San Francisco, which is awesome. Like it was a record store, DIY venue. It was called Epicenter Zone, I think, and it was in a kind of a bad neighborhood. Bad is relative, but we got robbed. Like all my stuff got robbed as soon as we got there, and we were there for like an hour, and out of nowhere, a giant Jack Daniels bottle flew out of some building and landed right on our windshield. Like we had just gotten there, like rolled up. So anyway, beyond Florida, a lot of good times. Again, Florida, the Gainesville Connect was a big deal.
And End of the Century Party also recorded with Rob McGregor, who has done a lot of bands, was in a lot of bands in Florida, and has recorded a ton of Florida bands as well. So, talk about your experience recording with Rob, and did you have much of a relationship with him prior to that?
Well, we're all interconnected. So many bands recorded with Rob. Awake, Dawn from Awake moved to Gainesville and started a band called Claire Mel with some other people from Brandon. So Claire Mel and Richie from Tampa. A lot of our friends were in Claire Mel, and so I believe they recorded with Rob a lot, and everybody recorded with Rob. He had a great sound, and so we went up there and recorded, and that was probably our best sounding recordings. It was a pleasure to work with, and he's a cool guy, and it was sort of a family. He was in the scene big time at that time. Everyone was recording there. A lot of our friends were, so that was great. Really liked those recordings. We other studios and the Century Party. We did a lot of home recordings with friends. And then we also there was a place in Tampa called Audio Lab, which we didn't really vibe with. It was kind of lame. Like this guy, they were kind of, I don't want to talk bad about anybody, but Audio Lab was one in Tampa and we recorded, I think it was on a comp, but it was a bad vibe. We didn't really dig it.
So, you guys put out a lot more output than perhaps the first go around with Awake.
Yeah,
And there was a compilation that came out that pretty much wrapped up everything into a discography,
yeah.
which I feel like you can see a lot of bands of that era. All their material can fit onto one or two CDs. Was that everything the band did on that discography, or was there maybe something that got left off or something that just wasn't completed or may not have been recorded?
That was everything. That was everything. I mean, we did comps. We were on a lot of comps. We did 7-inch comps. We did our own 7-inch. Then we had two. One was a European songs, dances, drums. One was our first 7-inch, and then we were just on a bunch of comps. We were even on. I think we were on tape comps. So yeah, that did cover it all. But that was the vibe back then for our type of music was, you know, making a record wasn't really like that amazing to our scene. It was like, just being with friends and collaborating, making, comps and split records, that stuff's cool. And that was kind of the scene back then. So that's why a lot of bands were like, here's our discography, because it was on like so many, separated things from different labels with different, recordings.
Sure. So while you were away, traveling in the US and abroad. What were things like back at the Blue Chair?
Just other people were manning the ship, you know. The After Blue Chair, I started a record store called Guerrilla Music, and that's when we really went on big tours and the long tours, and just had my friend man the shop, just show up every day and open the doors. Same with the Blue Chair days. Like there was other people working, like we had other people that we trusted just running the shop, so it wasn't a huge deal. I went on tour not just within the Century Party, but other bands from Tampa. I went on tour with Home, this band called Home, which is like a indie rock kind of, band. They were friends of mine. They played the Blue Chair all the time. We went on, they got signed to Relativity Records, and we took my station wagon with a U-Haul and, drove around the country. I also went on tour with Claire Mel in '95. Jumped in a van, went to California with them in '95. I loved touring. I mean, it's such an adventure. That maybe, I don't know if kids do it as much these days, but I wouldn't know. But it's the ultimate adventure to go out and see the world and take a chance and play music, and just like talk to people that are like-minded. I loved it. So I jumped on tours more than just my bands, so.
So when the Blue Chair finally came to its conclusion, talk about just the conclusion of it and what was that like?
Yeah, so Ybor City, all roads lead to Ybor City. Ybor City had changed a lot. It became a sort of a target for some kind of, developer's dream. Like it's like this is it, man. And it actually failed, ended up failing several times, you know, to my knowledge. So Ybor had changed. There was a lot of, rents changed a lot. We didn't own the venue, the building. Tom had moved to New York. It was just me. So we had one epic show at the end, which was Ass Suck, End of the Century Party, and I think Inhumanity played as well. Kind of like the big ending. And then I took all the stuff and put it in what's called the Channel District. Now it's a big development called Water Street, and opened a small store there called Guerrilla Music. But we just had a big show at the end. All the community, all the good people, all the good friends helped me, move things, and everyone was just so kind, and it was just kind of like the end, man. I think it was 96, maybe end of 95, beginning of 96, I think. And we just moved stuff to the channel side and had a big show. And I started doing, we were doing hardcore shows in like random places, like, which was fun. We did a show, there was across from the Blue Chair, there was this patio, like this dirt lot. And there was a guy, Vince, that owned it. And he would always sell hot dogs and stuff while we were having shows and had kids out front. And I was like, can we do a show? Well, let us do a show out here outside. And so we did some sick shows out there. We did Harriet the Spy, which is like a punk band. This great band from Canada called One Eyed God Prophecy. And like we had these like crazy, like huge hardcore shows outside. And literally the cops would walk up to me and go, "Is this your show?" Like I'd have to shut it down. It was fun. And we would have, like, there used to be these kids that would play buckets for money and stuff, and like do like a show, like dance, and we would have them open up for the hardcore bands and pass around like, "Hey, you guys got," and pass around the hat to collect money. We did a show in Ybor at this guy called me. I'd always get people calling me. I don't want to say the word culture vulture too much, but there would be people that was like, "How do I get a piece of that?" That would call me, and we would just laugh, like, "Oh my God, look at this guy calling me." We did a show. It was Ice Nine, End of the Century Party, and a couple other bands. It was these sick hardcore bands. It was at this lot, at this auto garage, okay? And it was total chaos. Like there was, maybe a couple hundred kids. They were swinging from the rafters, and the cops came, and it's still to this day. So I'm trying to tell you that even when the Blue Chair shut down, we were doing hardcore shows at like random venues that were really like DIY and sketchy, and cops will shut it down. And then at the same time, I was promoting hip hop shows starting like in '96 at clubs, at proper, nightclubs and stuff at the same time as, and while we are doing that. So that's it kind of transitioned into not centralized, like
Right.
maybe a decentralized music producing, music promoting kind of thing.
So with some of the hip hop, I know when we last were really spending some time talking about it, there weren't a ton of names that came to mind that we were able to
Not
discuss.
locals. Yeah,
Not
not like
locals, right? Not
Tampa,
locals, right? Not locals. But now that the 90s are a little bit further on, and you were starting to promote more hip hop shows in the later 90s, who were some of the artists that were up and coming or some of the groups that you can remember now that you were getting a chance to work with, but also you were a fan of? You were checking them out whether you were promoting the show or not.
yeah. So the hip hop stuff started, we were doing Blue Chair, having local hip hop shows and a couple other like DIY venue shows at that time with local artists. And then my friends Sandman, Kashim, and this guy DJ Fader. This, we were getting calls. Sandman was a WUSF college radio, so he had a lot of connections. And so we started booking national acts. One of the first ones was a group called Mobb Deep in '96, and it was a big deal. To this day, legendary, but they didn't show up. There's a long story there. But that was our first like national act. We had to have a plan B.
Is
But
there
then
a
we,
is there a shorter version of that story you can
yes,
share?
it was The Source. There's a magazine called The Source. It wasn't, this was not, let me say one thing really important, Jeff. Hip hop music in Tampa, Florida, Ybor City in '93 to '97 was not popular music. It was not, the clubs weren't playing it. Radio wasn't playing unless you're 88.5. People thought you were a gangster. People thought you were a bad person, unlike today. So a lot of people try to pretend like, oh, I was there and I was doing that. And I no, you weren't. So it was much like hardcore, much like it. So I said, so the Mobb Deep show, it was the Source magazine mobile van tour. They said we're bringing Mobb Deep and the Almighty RSO and like some other DJs, and we're like, and we're like, okay, we're in, man. We signed it all up, and they're like, oh yeah, things change. Like right when like the thing was like the day before, they're like, things changed. Mobb Deep's not coming. And we're like, oh man. So that's showbiz. That's just the way it goes. So Mobb Deep did not play that show in '96. They were on the flyer. We were hyped. It did not happen. But then at the same period of time, through Sandman, we started working with a group of MCs from New York called Duck Down. One of the early shows, Duck Down is Black Moon, OGC, Helter Skelter, Smif-N-Wessun. And we did a show at a venue called The Rub in like '96, and it was a group called the Fab Five. The Fab Five consisted of OGC, which was three guys, and Helter Skelter, which is Sean Price and Rock. So it was the Fab Five, and they had a song called "La Flower" out. It was very popular. So we booked the show, the Fab Five, and it was amazing. And I wish we had computers. I wish we had cell phones. I wish I had a video of it right now. So then that began a series through Sandman. We did uh, Fab Five, Smif-N-Wessun. They changed the name of Cocoa Brothers. We did shows Overtime, Smif-N-Wessun, Black Moon. We did a lot of shows for the Duck Down camp in Tampa. I was a part of that. We did shows KRS-One like three times or two or three times. One of the greatest shows. I could tell you hip hop stories if you're interested. One of the greatest shows that I was a part of was a guy named the Jizza from the Wu-Tang Clan. It was like '99. He had an album called Beneath the Surface, and it was amazing. I'm just a huge fan. To this day, I'm like, God, that was amazing. Some wild stories. I did production for other crews besides Sandman and House of Hip Hop and everybody. The best hip hop show I saw in Tampa that I was a part of was a group called the Lost Boys. They performed at a place called the Parthenon. They were just so entertaining. Their music was amazing. I did the sound. I hooked up this DIY sound in this club, and this show, it was amazing. That was one of the best hip hop shows I ever saw back in that era. I have a funny story. We did Redman was another performer who come through Tampa through various people we knew. One time, Redman was playing at a place called the Parthenon, and I had been hired by this group of guys called the DLL Camp group, nice guys, friends of mine, to do the sound. And so I rented all this gear. I like practically lived in this nightclub overnight, putting this thing together with power amps and cables by myself, no help, like, breaking my back, like I almost spent 24 hours in this club building this sound system. Okay. So the show starts and the opening act performs and they were great and everything. And it's like probably like 1 o'clock in the morning, 12:30 maybe. And there's like 800 hip hop fans that are restless, waiting for Redman to hit the stage. They're like so restless. Like they're like, let's do this. Like, and I'm the sound guy. And Redman comes, so then they're like, okay, Redman, come on out. Redman comes out and the music hits the sound system and it all dies in front of like 800 people. And everyone in the whole place looked right at me. And I was like, and so it was a big lesson. Not to get too tech on it. You always have to distribute the power to different outlets for power amps. You can't have them all in one thing. You have to be on different breakers. And so I turned the amps down, split them up real quick, and got back to the show. But it was a serious, like, oh my God, there's like 800 people looking right at it. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. That was a big story from the hip hop days.
I
But
imagine you eventually got things squared away.
I did. I distributed the power correctly. Got some extension cords because I had been doing punk shows my whole life. Like it's not my first. Like I had done by the time we were doing hip hop shows in the mid to late '90s. I had done hundreds of shows like where I'm the guy turning the amps, turning everything on from playing to turning a light to fixing a drum. Like I'd been doing that like it's my whole life at that point in time. So I figured it out, but it was a rowdy, sketchy moment in my life.
I can only imagine. Those seconds probably felt like
Oh
hours.
man, I still think about it. Like it was like 800 people, and then think like,
I'll tell you, Edwin, it's refreshing to hear some of these stories because a lot of guests who come on the podcast don't typically get into a lot of hip hop crossing with their punk years or hardcore or metal or death metal or anything like
yeah.
that. So it's nice to be able to hear some of this as part of your journey. So when End of the Century Party ended, where did you wind up musically after that?
Well, I moved to New York City eventually in 2000. So I went to New York. I moved to New York City, played in some bands up there. One was called Articles. One was called No Omega. We did a little bit of touring with No Omega, and then I moved back to Tampa, and then played in some more bands here, Abandoned Vehicles, IFA, and then we started a band called Science and made a record, Science, eventually 2014.
I feel like science, in some way, takes us back to the Awake era. Maybe it's just my ears, but is there any connection musically you feel like between both of those bands?
Yes, two of the members are from Awake. So Don and Mark were in Awake with me. So we kind of, that's what you hear. It's kind of the same guys. So we came full circle. And I'm really proud. That was a great moment in time for me to make that record. And I'm proud of it. It's been, 10 years now. But proud of that record, Science, East Coast Education. Still stoked on it. Played a lot of shows, had a lot of fun.
I was curious because you're a lot older now, right?
That's
You're
right.
not just getting together in a van and or in a station wagon and just traveling around the US and what have you. So now that you're a lot older, your bandmates are a lot older, but you've known these guys, right, for a long time. So what is that like for you when you're now, when you were doing science and you were playing shows, you were doing some touring? How are things the same and how are things different?
It's the number one rule of being in a band, if you want to be in a band, is show up for practice. So if you can't get past that, like if you just can't, if you, it's just like every time is a problem. Like if you can't get past that, then stop. So as you get older, that's that number one rule is like either you're in or you're out because we're not going to beg you to show up. And and so life, you get older, you have life responsibilities, and but for me, Jeff, I it's inside of me, man. Like I really the art is inside of me. Like I really at that point in time on the science project, I was I really wanted to do this. Like I was like, we're gonna do this, man. Like I'm gonna do this. And if nobody listens to it, I don't care. I just had to get it out. And so that overcame the domestic challenges of age and time at that point in time. And luckily, Don and Mark were on the ride with me too. So they went for it. So
How did the landscape change in the Tampa Bay area when you all would play shows locally?
it's universal, man. I mean, like if it's just we had so many friends, just like we did when we were teenagers, that everyone's like, yeah, you're on, let's go. Here's a show, and people were still have for in Tampa's the musical scene, the people of the Blue Chair era are still doing bands and stuff and booking shows and kind of doing stuff like it's kind of the culture. And so we didn't have we fit right in. They're like, of course you guys can play. Here you go. Here's we had more shows than we could play. Like we actually there's probably one or two that we probably shouldn't have taken. And I kind of regret, but yeah, it was we fit right in. It was things. Tampa's a musical place. I mean from my perspective, because I've been a part of it for so long. So maybe others it's not, but it's a very musical cultural place. It's funny because I moved to New York City, and just to generalize, a lot of people in New York City are running away from their towns. Like you're like, they didn't know how cool I was in Wisconsin. I'm going to New York City, the Lower East Side, and I never related to that. I was in New York going, you know what? It's pretty cool where I live. Like it wasn't I wasn't running away. So coming, the science thing fit right in. No, not a big deal. We had a great time.
When you do get that opportunity to connect with people, what are some of their memories? Do they typically like to talk about one in particular of the different ventures that you were with over the years?
It depends on who you're talking. Those are like different points in time and kind of a different demographic. So that's why I think, I mean, even when we first started talking here, Jeff, it's kind of hard to define. So, you know, there's certain people who are like know me for the blue chair. There's certain people that are like were on the front lines with us in Awake when we were kids, or even metal, like when we were like little kids, like you go to a high school reunion or something. And then there's end of the century party. They're all distinct and different. So and they don't really cross over. So the people that know me from like the hip hop scene over time have never even been in the same room with somebody that knows who End of the Century Party is. It's like there's way like they're not in this. They didn't cross over. I cross over, but like
That's a
they didn't.
pretty far reach, though, Edwin.
It's
For
it's
most for
it,
most
it's
people.
yeah. So I guess to your question. it's all different, and
Sure.
that's a beautiful thing. That's a good thing, it's cool. There's what do they say? There's strength in diversity. There's strength in diversity of thought. There's strength in diversity of perspectives. And so, I'm glad you're listening to my story right now because I don't want to often get a chance to describe all these different areas of my background.
And it's so fantastic. And I'm so glad that so many of those checking out this episode will get a chance to do that because I know you're no stranger to doing interviews. You've been interviewed before. But
Sure.
as far as something multi-layered like this, especially such an emphasis on all these various Florida periods in which you had a part in, whether you were just a fan, whether you were helping to promote the show or doing sound or whatever the case may have been. It's just so fantastic to unpack these things. And going just real quick back to the blue chair, as far as the legacy is of the blue chair, in your own words, what do you think that is?
I think the legacy is a we were a we gave an opportunity, a platform to the population of Tampa to perform, express, to do their art free of any rules or regulations for a period of 5 to 6 years. And when people talk to me with open hearts about their experience, it's usually gratefulness because it was a part of their journey and if it's a musical, mostly musical, but I think that's a wonderful thing and that's a wonderful legacy to have been a part of somebody's creative life and rather than we worked at the same job 10 years ago. It's kind of nice. It's creative. It's special.
Considering that not everyone's father promoted punk and hardcore and hip hop acts and what have you, what do your kids think about their dad's legacy in terms of what you did for the scene in Tampa?
Well, I don't think they're aware. I don't think, my children, one's 15, one's 12. Um, it's a different world. Maybe they'll watch this and get some perspective. They know, that I have a musical background. They know my friends, the skateboarding background. They know, uh, they know me. But it's just hard to put into context. It's hard to say, what did your dad do in the 90s? Like wouldn't be one sentence. It would be kind of hard, and that's okay. Just like the music I've made, just like the life I've led creatively or musically, you can never explain it. Just like the Awake record, you can't, just like End of the Century Party, just like Science. It's okay to not be able to explain. And I think my children over time will absorb little data points and kind of like put it together, but it is sort of hard to frame. So they don't really, I don't think they really get it. And that's okay, but they will hopefully over time in a positive sense.
Sure. It's been fantastic having you on, Edwin.
Hey, I appreciate
I
it.
can't thank you enough for taking the time to take us through your journey and unpack so many of those different moments over it. And very excited for those that are checking out this episode who may have been a part of it, but don't know all the ins and outs. And that's always the fun part too, is those that may have even been there. You all could have been a part of the exact same show, but people have a whole different experience
Yeah,
and it's always great to hear that. So I just can't thank you enough for coming on to share your stories. So as we get ready to close things out, I would love to give you the last word. Any final thoughts you'd like to share to the folks out there, both listening to this episode and watching it on YouTube? The floor is yours to take us home.
sure. I think I would just say to the young people out there that there's so much. to do. There's so much to learn. It's infinite. The music, the art, you're not stuck. You can. There's always something new to learn. To this day, you can study any type of music. You can get into it. It just never ends. And the journey, I guess, is kind of a cliche, is really the destination. And that's been a part of, I've living proof of that. And the other thing I'll say is coming from the underground music scenes, is for young people to not be exploited. Don't get exploited. It doesn't. You don't need an internet to grab a skateboard and grind a curb. You don't need the internet to grab a microphone and some guitars with your friends in front of your friends and testify your heart. So stay true, and keep learning.